That's always super important. Character relationships in your story is basically the foundation of anything you're going to do, because it's going to be based on, even if you're doing characters that are not human, like fish or talking animals or whatever it is, they're still character relationships, and it's based on what we know as human beings. So we're personifying and anthropomorphizing these elements if we're doing those kinds of movies, and we're creating relationships between characters, and it's got to be believable. So there's a couple of things that I always think about when I'm doing my character relationships, and there are a couple of key things. And if you keep them in mind as you're coming up with your story and as you're working through the sequences, anything that you're doing, not only should you be thinking about structure and, let's say a beginning, middle, and end, and maybe have a first act, second act, climax, and things kind of arc and they grow throughout your story. But you also want to think of character relationships and the relationships between each other. And there's two things that I find key. One is conflict and contrast. So the first one is conflict. We've talked a little bit about that, and if you've been following us at Storyboard Art for a while, you know that conflict is one of the main things that we latch onto as visual storytellers to be able to show the story and show the progression of what's going on. So you could have external conflicts, which is something like an army coming to attack a town, and that's a big external conflict. You can have internal conflicts, which is basically like the character going through the motions in their head and maybe second guessing themselves as they do decisions and going through the world. But then between two characters, you also want to have conflict. Now, think of some of your favorite movies, right? Most of the time, probably every single one of the characters are in conflict with each other. And that, in one form or another, it could be subtle or it can be very overt. So, like the Lethal Weapon series, which is pretty well known, the two, the buddy picture there, the two cop partners, they're in constant conflict with each other, and there's a lot of contrast with those two characters, right? And there's visual contrast because one is black and the other's white. There's also contrast in their personality, and then that creates conflict. Well, in that particular movie, it created some conflict because their way of doing things were totally different. Yet through that film and through that series of movies, you see how they're able to work together, and that kind of creates the comedy in that, right? The juxtaposition there. So, but think about those two things when you're doing your character relationships, because you want to have contrast. You don't want any characters to be the same. That's the other thing I wanted to point out. Think of some of your favorite movies again, even like big ensemble pieces. Probably each one of those characters are completely different. Each one has a unique way of like a unique take on the world that they're in, and they also have a unique way of talking and a unique way of just their whole personality. So you can see this a lot in like the Pixar movies. That's something really common because when they have big ensemble pieces like Toy Story, each toy is different, each toy acts different, each toy talks different, right? So there you have a little bit of contrast, right? And because everybody's different, you're gonna have a little bit of conflict. And the same thing goes what I mentioned with like Lethal Weapon. They're using that same formula for Toy Story, and you have Buzz Lightyear versus Woody, and they're also in constant conflict. Now, yes, they work together throughout the series of movies, but their way of doing things are totally different. So you have this kind of principle when you have a love story, that it's not just the two characters fall in love and it's so easy. You also have things like that they're maybe opposites attract, and maybe they're in opposite worlds. It's like it's that kind of idea that creates visual interest, and you latch onto that to create the story. So another way to put this is it's kind of like that fish out of water concept in a relationship or some kind of romantic comedy. You have two characters that maybe come from different worlds, but they end up getting together romantically, right? So when those two worlds clash, that's where you have the opportunity to show that stuff visually, and it's going to create excitement and something to watch, some drama on screen. This is typically what you want to be doing because, again, the opposite of this is not where you want to be. You don't want to have two characters that are the same. You don't want them coming from the same world, because there's really nothing that's meaty and juicy to be able to latch onto that visually to create some images and make something unique about that story. Okay, so I encourage you guys that as you're working through your sequences, your own stories, maybe pitching ideas, that you're creating not only personality contrast, right? But you're also doing it visually, right? So the characters actually look physically different. One might be taller, one might be, shorter, skinnier, fatter, whatever than the other character. And this way, you're going to accentuate and push and exaggerate that concept, right? And you can do it a little bit more subtle. You can do it more overt. I always find that people, artists, most of the time, in thinking that they're going too far, don't go far enough. So I always say push things, push it to the extreme. Make sure that you are really getting something exciting visually when you're doing your stories. And the conflict always should be there as well. And it doesn't have to be this enormous conflict. It could be just argument and bickering. And usually, most of the time, the more dramatic and the more, let's say, action-based the story is, the bigger your conflict is going to be between the characters and also between the main story arc. Okay, so those two things are really, really important. I find that they're not often used to the advantage, because you want to make that visually awesome as you're doing this stuff. And to give you an example of this, I saw an amazing movie that came out a couple of years ago, and I'm always late to the game, but searching through my Netflix feed and catching up on things is great. I saw the film Hell or High Water with Jeff Bridges. And if you guys haven't seen that film, I highly recommend it. It is not. It is a totally classy drama that I find just the execution is so amazing. And I think there's a couple of twists and turns in there, if you haven't seen already, that you will enjoy, that anybody would enjoy, because it's unexpected. The other thing to take note of in that film, and especially for those who might say, well, it's boring and slow and this and that. The other thing to take note of that film, a couple things, is the dialogue, the beautiful and wonderful dialogue. Each one of those characters has a lot of contrast, and they are in conflict with each other at various degrees. And so Jeff Bridges plays a sheriff. He's got a partner, and he's always in conflict with his partner. There's two brother characters there. There's a lot of contrast between those two brothers, even though they're from the same family. So that's really, really cool, and that was on my mind. The other thing about that film, which I encourage you to see it just on a visual level, the cinematography and the camera work is amazing. Just really, really well done. Beautifully, beautifully executed. So I encourage you guys to check out that film. And maybe you guys have some other examples of these principles that I'm talking about. If so, let me know. Hey, so let me just answer a couple questions here. That we got. Well, one, I should thank you guys for joining, because these chats are always fun for me to do, and the more interaction we have and the more sharing you guys do amongst each other as far as building your network and following each other and even following our page is great. So we got a question here from another Sergio. All right. And Sergio Jarbase Official. How much to make a storyboard? So I'm guessing you're talking about rates. Is that what it is? That goes all over the map. We did have a couple of good discussions, and this is just a reminder for everybody watching that you can watch the replays of this on Facebook and YouTube, and we're streaming live on Instagram and Facebook as well. So we did talk about rates before, and that price goes all over the place. It's basically you get paid as much as you're able to negotiate. All right, that's the real answer. The actual number value can vary depending on the job. So you could have something that's going to pay you, and usually it's calculated in a day rate. You could be making $1,000 a day on a really high end, super awesome production, because they need you in a rush, and you are the person that they need, and you can solve their visual problems, and they're willing to pay that rate. Or you could be making $100 a day on the low end, just because you're doing a favor for somebody, and it's just like a quick job that you can do and turn that around. Now I'm not trying to like dodge that question, because the average story rate, I would recommend you go to the guild and actually look up those numbers, and you can go to the Animation Guild or the LA Guild. I forgot which one is the local 800 or the Art Directors Guild. At any rate, go to Storyboard Art. We got a link to that on our Pro Artist Guide page, and that's in the menu there. So their rates, if I remember correctly, from 2018, because they do a survey of the industry, it varies from, let's say, junior to supervisor level, but I think it's like $1,500 a week, maybe something like that. Maybe for a entry level is like $1,200 a week. So you divide that by 5 working days, and you got your day rate. And so like $300 a day. That's usually starting, and then you go on up from there. So hopefully that will get you guys at least a ballpark figure. Right now, every job is different, and again, you have to negotiate your rates. And it's good to have a set rate that you feel confident that you can not only give a value to your client, but also that you feel happy earning that type of money for the amount of work that you're putting in, right? So the big takeaway on this is you can make a living at this, and for people who don't know about this stuff, and there's plenty of work to go around, and there's a lot of freelance stuff and a lot of opportunity for this. So you gotta be on top of it, and you gotta be able to look for it. Okay. So I got a really good comment here from Abby on Facebook here, saying Rex, Echo, and Fives, etc. look exactly the same for the most part. What were the strategies to make their characters different? I'm on season 4, but feel free to spoil away. Haha. So he's talking about Clone Wars, obviously. So I worked on Clone Wars, and you're talking about a lot of the clones. So one thing that was really cool that I think the designers did an excellent job on is, yes, all the clones are the same, but they did a great job of just visually differentiating the clone characters, because they're all twins, right? So what you got to do is, some have different haircuts, some have different tattoos, they had different colors on their actual clone uniforms, and each one also had a different personality, and they tried to do that as much as possible. The cool thing there is that even the voice acting was tweaked a little bit, so that you got a uniqueness to each one of those characters. Now it was really important to track, because as if you guys are following the series, or if you're fans of the show, that you'll know that you got the people that love Commander Rex, other guys liked Echo, Cody, and all these other guys in there, and there's some that died off, and it was fun to see that. So there's the visual contrast, which is what I'm talking about here, and then also the personality contrast. And then actually talking about this, I didn't even think to it, but so obvious is the Clone Wars is each one of those clones is also kind of in conflict with each other at certain degrees, because as a group, when they're banded together, they're kind of like trading insults with one another, although they're still part of the same team. In fact, there were some deserter clones that we did some episodes on that too, but it's all good stuff. So Jason likes my shirt. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, this is a Storyboard Art shirt, and you guys are visual storytellers, so am I. So I'm sporting my gear here. So let me go here to another question. This is a good question here from KidCog. So you're talking about what type, do you use any type of storyboarding programs? Yes, of course. There are many out there, and for you guys who are just getting into this stuff, I recommend you check out a couple. They run the gamut. So On the free and cheap end, you can get Storyboarder. So look that up. I think that's from Wonder Unit, I believe, is the developer of that software. Just do a Google search for Storyboarder, ER at the end, right? And software, and it's a free software that's pretty good to use. The other one I would recommend is Autodesk Sketchbook. That's also free, and it has a timeline. You can use that. The one that is probably most popular right now is Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. It's a storyboard-specific program for doing boards. There's another animation program I like is TV Paint, and one that's also getting some popularity recently too, because it's got a lot of good 2D animation tools, is Blender. Blender is also free, and you can download that. It's a 3D program, but you can do a lot of 2D cards and 2D images within the 3D engine, and then place that in there and do a lot of really cool parallax and 3D stuff, almost make it previs. And then, of course, I can't go without saying Photoshop. That's pretty much the basis for any kind of design and art application and program. So Photoshop is still a really good one for doing 2D boards. Cool. Let's see here. Liquid Culture Shock. Question from you. What are some unique ways character contrast can be established? That's an interesting question, because it's almost infinite if you think about it. The second you introduce a character, you are describing the unique personality of that character. And not only physically the way they look, and this is live action animation, any kind of narrative storytelling, any kind of visual storytelling, video games, you name it. You present a character, you have a silhouette, an image, and that character has a unique personality. In fact, what you should do also visually is have a unique silhouette, and that could be really something cool. So that's the first thing, is that first look and that first impact, a silhouette, maybe the lighting on a character, how tall they are, how wide they are, what their clothing looks like. And think of the silhouettes of classic westerns, John Wayne films, of course the Sergio Leone films, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Think of that. All those three main characters with Lee Van Cleef and Clint Eastwood, and what's the third one? Somebody help me out. They all have different silhouettes, and they all dress different, look different, they have different personalities. So that's a really obvious way, is that they're going to talk different, they're going to look different physically. One might be tan, the other might be completely pale, the other one might be tall, the other one might be short. So you're going to design this in your sequences as you get going. So that's right from the get-go. That's one way to do it. The other thing to do is that personality traits. I quote Save the Cat a lot of times, but I really like some of their catchphrases, or Blake Schneider's catchphrase. It's like, when you design a character, you give them a limp and an eye patch. Okay, so that's one of his things. Every character needs a limp and an eye patch. The metaphor there is that each character needs to be unique. So you give one an eye patch, you give the other one a limp, right? And obviously exaggerating this, referring to like a pirate or something, but that each character has a unique trait. Somebody might stutter when they talk. Somebody might have a really thick accent that you can't even understand it, like the movie Snatch with Brad Pitt in this crazy Irish accent, right? So that makes the character unique, contrasting everybody else, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so and help me out if I'm making any assumptions that you think are not accurate. So let me answer Victor's question here. With so many aspects of storytelling to learn about and so much history to study, are there one or two key aspects of storyboarding you would advise a junior story artist to never lose sight of? Are there any story artists in particular that is inspiring, exciting to you at the moment? Great questions. Let me think on that for a second, because the one thing that we repeat often about story work and just visual design is clarity. You're going to hear that from probably any board artist that has been through the ringer, because we've all heard it from directors that came before us. We've all heard it in critiques and stuff, is to make your images and your compositions as clear as possible, because think about this, you're making a storyboard, you're making a statement. The statement has to be understood visually, right? It's like a visual card that has to be understood by everybody who watches that film or that story. And that clarity has to be key. So that's one of the major aspects I think everybody should always keep in mind. Is my panel clear? Is my story sequence clear? Are the character motivations clear? Right? That's where clarity comes in. Okay, and so that one I think is great. The other thing that I think you need to, or what I would say is something to be very, very mindful of as a storyteller, as a visual artist, as somebody who's getting into storyboards, is this idea of constantly learning and constantly pushing yourself, okay? Challenging yourself to do something out of your comfort zone. Because if you know how to do something well and you just keep on repeating it, you're not going to grow as an artist. And this is where I encourage you guys to push yourself as storytellers. Maybe get some material that's really hard that you've never done before and try it to see if you can solve those story problems, because that's what you get paid for. You get paid for solving problems, and solving visual problems, solving story problems. So those are a couple of tips there. Now, are there any story artists in particular inspiring and exciting at the moment? I mean, I have a lot of ones that I like. I'm a big fan, but I'm actually not up to date on how all the guys work in the industry. I will call out some of my peers that I've worked with that I think are really great. Certainly, guys we've had on Storyboard Art, certainly like Robert Valley, Octavio Rodriguez, Sam Hood. These are all guys who like seasoned pros that have been working in story for many years. Ted Mathot has been a great friend and a great inspiration just to learn from that guy. Derek Thompson, there's another guy at Pixar, Derek Thompson and Ted. Derek is amazing, great, fantastic draftsman, and wonderful, creative storyteller. So those are some of the guys that I know of personally. Now, there's many others. Ronnie Del Carmen is another well-known guy. Mark Andrews, another really a great guy at these guys all come from Pixar, and some of these guys are directing now. So they started in story and then moved on to doing other stuff, and now they're directing their own movies and doing some cool things. And I worked with Dave Filoni, who's directing the Mandalorian series for Disney. That guy started in story, and he's a really great storyteller. So there's a bunch of people you guys can be looking at and learning from. All right, cool. So let me run through some of these questions here. Let me go back to Instagram. Great. This is a great question from Arapachi. So how can what aspects of my portfolio need to be convincing enough to get hired without experience nor education? Now, that's kind of a loaded question. Okay, now experience, I'll take that. That let's say you don't have any work experience. Now, education is something you cannot get a job without. Let me define this. I'm not talking about you need a 4-year degree, and I'm not talking about you need to go to any fancy art school, anything like that. Education you need to understand what it takes to become a story artist, and you need to educate yourself. So either you've learned it at a school or you've learned it yourself, but you're still educated. I would consider yourself, even as a self-taught kind of person who's never actually gone to an official art school or any kind of program, that you need to learn these skills. So that's why we exist at Storyboard Art. If you're a newbie, come on to us. Check out that visual story course that we have. It's for free. You can get your feet wet there. But you need to understand what it takes to become a story artist. So that's what the education part is. So learn your perspective, learn your draftsmanship, your drawing skills, composition, design, structure, story structure, all those things you need to be understanding. And just what I'm talking about today, character relationships, conflicts, all of those things within a story are really, really important. Camera work, right? Now, if you don't have any experience, what do you have to do? You have to create samples for your portfolio in order to show that. Okay, so I would highlight your samples, right? So create really good samples of story sequences, and you don't need that. Nobody's going to ask you if you went to Harvard or whatever art school, and nobody cares, by the way. So don't go to Harvard. You're going to save a lot of money if you don't go there. But you need the skills. So if you don't know how to get the skills, if you've never done this before, but you do want to work in story, I would recommend looking at some kind of program, coaching, mentorship, or whatever. And again, start with us for free on the visual story course, and then you find out what your interests are, right? And then when you say convincing, what's got to be convincing is the samples that you show have to show off your drawing skills and show your unique storytelling skills, so that you are solving those visual problems, and then you can land a job. Hopefully you get a call back and you get an interview, and then you get a job. Now, if you show those skills, even if you have no idea how to use the software, or you've never been inside of a pipeline, inside of a studio, they can show you that. That's easy. It's relatively easy to learn. The hard thing to learn is storytelling and draftsmanship and art skills. Those things are really hard to learn. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some ideas. And there's some great comments going on in the chat. Thank you, fellas, for putting some awesome references in there. And like I said, go back to the replay and just check out some of the comments on Facebook and see what people are talking about. So there's, the art books, Tim is talking about Game of Thrones art books and storyboard books. I know those guys did previs. So that's all really, really valid stuff if you want to get inspired. And nowadays you can just do a web search, just search storyboards, and a couple of them are going to pop up for live action, for all kinds of medium, advertising, video games. And there's really quality work from everybody, from a lot of guys out there. So that's great. It's inspiring. You see that and it's like, wow, I got to raise my game, because there's a lot of people doing some really good work. Cool. Okay, I got a great question from Kenny Blanca. How to draw. So Kenny, you are one of my mentorship students, and my friend, you already know how to draw. And what I think is cool, and I was talking a lot about people who are self-taught. Now, it might be nice, you guys should follow up with my boy Kenny here, to ask him what his journey has been and how he was able to learn skills and drawing. So yes, that question of like, can I get better at drawing, is always going to be there. You should always practice it. But I know you're being a little bit sarcastic, because you're doing great. And I know these guys like Tim and Kenny from our mentorship program. In fact, if you guys are interested, I should mention that we are actively scheduling our mentorship program for 2020 this year. So that's one thing that I think we wanted to do, and now even more than ever, because of this whole Corona lockdown, that we want people to be able to get the story skills that they need. So go to Storyboard Art, check out courses, and you're going to see a listing there for the mentorship. You can sign up. Right now you can sign up to the waiting list, because we don't have the official dates there. So that's something, when the time comes, we'll let you guys know about it. All right. And then question here from Irvin about the 999 about the live stream. So yeah, I've been doing these live streams probably about twice a week, and usually after my workday around 7 p.m. Pacific time. And we only go for about half an hour. We talk story, and we're answering some questions here. And it's just me leading the charge here, the story chat. But what I really appreciate is you guys giving some good references, and even links, and even sharing with each other. So the people on here, guess what? We're probably storytellers, right? So let's talk about networking for a second. How about you grab everybody that you find interesting? Maybe they had a good comment. You go look up their profile and you connect with them. You follow them to see what they're doing. Like my guys Tim and Kenny and other people who have been on here for a while, and see what they're up to, and then learn some things and connect with each other and build the network, right? That's really important. That's why we're doing these chats. And hopefully, if you have any questions, let me be a springboard. Let me be a springboard for inspiration and maybe pointing you in the right direction. So thanks, Kenny. You're a good sport. uh, so there's some good, yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Powerpuff Girls. Uh, Now, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the recent series, have been publishing a lot of their animatics. So if you guys want to see some really exciting and amazing animatic examples, and for those of you guys who may not know what I'm talking about, an animatic is a story reel that's compiled together so your sequences are timed out and it's like shot in a visual movie and you can see the timing of the show. And the stuff for Mutant Ninja Turtles has been great. Just really, really nice, very animated, really dynamic, and a very cool way to see that on the style, right? So I think this is a good spot to end this one today. I will say as we leave here that you should be watching movies as much as possible to have some fun with it, enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, get inspired by other people who have maybe some ideas that you didn't expect. Like I said, I saw that film this weekend, and I was totally blown away. Hell or High Water, you guys should check it out. Really, really nice. And everything was on point for that movie as far as I'm concerned. And then you just, it's visual information that you log into your memory, and hopefully you can use that in your own projects and use that as inspiration. You might like the cinematography in a certain movie. You might like certain shots, and that's where you can use that for your own work and get inspired. And it's not ripping anything off. You're never gonna do it exactly the same way. You're just borrowing that as inspiration, and then from there you're gonna springboard off into your own ideas. So hopefully you guys will take that note. It's really important, and I think I've said this before, that you understand your film history and that you know your movies, both current films and past films, especially past films. A lot of people forget about that, like the classics. Man, you gotta be watching the classics. I'm talking like black and white, like 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way on up till now. And the easiest way to do that is maybe the top 10 films of every year. Just make a list. I mean, let's start with the decades. Maybe you can do the top 10 films in the decade, and then start like weaning that down. But it's really, really great. You might find some gems in there. Don't forget about foreign films. That's always something that you find some gems that way too. And then now it's so easy nowadays with streaming services. I remember the days I had to go to like the video store and like just that one obscure crazy video store. You get in there, it stinks, and like there's like 3 people in there, they're all weird. And you ask the guy, hey, do you have this film? And he's like, I don't know. We have to order it for 3 days later. It comes in there, it's on VHS. Like it's so hard to find these movies, and now it's so easy. You just do a web search, you look up IMDb, and at least you can figure out where it's coming from, and then you can go hunt it down. And I've even got like used DVDs that you can find online that just they show up at your door, and it's like it's cheap, it's awesome. So the resources nowadays, my friends, is all just great. All right, well with that, I'll say goodbye. Good luck. Keep working hard on everything, and keep up the good work, my friends. It's all about story. It's all about improvement. Okay, see ya. Have a good evening.